The church was overflowing. Hundreds of guests rose to their feet as the doors slowly opened. Everyone smiled. The string quartet played softly. Cameras flashed. The bride looked radiant in a gown she'd dreamed about since she was 13. The groom stood at the altar, trying and failing to hide the tears gathering in his eyes. Everything was perfect. Or so everyone believed. The tiny flower girl skipped happily down the aisle, scattering white rose petals with the carefree joy only a 6-year-old could possess. She wore a little ivory dress. Curly brown hair framed her face. She smiled at everyone she passed. No one noticed that halfway down the aisle, she suddenly stopped. The music continued. Guests chuckled, assuming she had become shy. The maid of honor quietly motioned for her to keep walking. Instead, the little girl slowly turned toward the groom. Her smile disappeared. Her tiny face became strangely serious. She walked away from the petals, away from the aisle, away from the bride, and straight toward the man waiting at the altar. The church fell silent. Even the musicians stopped playing. The child reached up, tugged gently on the groom's sleeve, and whispered, 5 words. 5 words no child should have known. The groom's face lost all color. His knees nearly gave out. His hands began to shake. He looked at the little girl as though he had just seen a ghost. Then, without saying a single word, he stepped away from the altar. The bride called his name. He didn't answer. The officiant tried to stop him. He kept walking. Guests began whispering. Some thought he was having a panic attack. Others believed he was about to run away. No one knew that the little girl's whisper had just uncovered a secret buried for nearly 28 years. A secret powerful enough to destroy a family, expose a betrayal, and reveal that the happiest day of 2 people's lives had been built upon the biggest lie either of them had ever believed. But here's the part that left everyone speechless. The flower girl didn't even understand what she'd said. She was only repeating the last thing her grandmother had whispered to her before she died 3 days earlier. And before this wedding was over, someone would be arrested. Someone would disappear forever. And one woman would discover that the man she was about to marry wasn't the greatest liar in the room. He was the greatest victim. Stay with me. Because what really happened inside that church wasn't a ruined wedding. It was the beginning of a truth that had waited almost 3 decades for the smallest voice in the room to finally set it free. But before we uncover the truth behind those 5 unforgettable words, you need to know why they mattered in the first place. And trust me, once you do, you'll realize this was never just a wedding gone wrong. It was the moment a 28-year-old lie finally came crashing down. Stay with me because the ending will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. And don't forget to like and hit the subscribe button for more plot twist stories like this. The church fell into complete silence. Every pair of eyes followed the groom as he slowly stepped away from the altar. His bride Vivienne reached for his hand. Caleb. Her voice trembled. Please, what's wrong? He stared at her. Not with anger. Not with fear. But with the expression of a man who had just realized the person standing before him might be a complete stranger. The little flower girl remained beside him, still holding her empty basket. She looked confused. She had no idea why everyone was crying. She had only done what her grandmother told her to do. Nothing more. Nothing less. The officiant finally broke the silence. Son, if something is wrong, perhaps we should step into my office and discuss it privately. Caleb didn't move. His eyes never left Vivienne. Slowly, he asked one question. How long have you known? A murmur spread across the church. Vivienne blinked. Known what? His voice became sharper. Don't lie to me. I've had enough lies for one lifetime. She looked genuinely frightened. I don't understand what you're talking about. Caleb pointed toward the little girl. She just whispered 5 words. And only someone from your family could possibly know what they mean. The color drained from Vivienne's face. Not because she understood the words, but because of what Caleb had just implied. My family. What does my family have to do with this? Caleb didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward the front row. Toward the bride's parents. Her father, Gideon Ashcroft, had built one of the largest construction companies in the state. Respected, powerful, untouchable. His mother sat perfectly still beside him. Elegant, composed. Not a single emotion crossed either of their faces. That disturbed Caleb more than anything. Everyone else looked confused. They looked prepared, as if they had been waiting for this moment. Then Caleb spoke. Very slowly, very carefully. The little girl whispered. The seller remembers everything. The entire church frowned. It sounded meaningless, almost childish. Except, Gideon Ashcroft dropped the champagne glass he had been holding. It shattered across the marble floor. The sharp sound echoed through the sanctuary. For the first time that morning, the powerful businessman looked afraid. Real fear. The kind no amount of money could hide. Caleb saw it. So did everyone else. Vivienne turned to her father. Dad, what does that mean? He answered too quickly. I have no idea. But his shaking hands betrayed him. At the back of the church, an elderly woman suddenly gasped. She stood so abruptly that her walking cane crashed to the floor. I knew it. She whispered. I knew this day would come. People turned toward her. She was one of the oldest guests. A distant relative no one had paid much attention to. Tears streamed down her face. She pointed directly at Gideon. You told everyone the fire destroyed that cellar. You swore there was nothing left. The church erupted into whispers. What cellar? What fire? What is she talking about? Gideon immediately stood. She's confused. She's 87. She suffers from dementia. But the old woman screamed so loudly her voice echoed through the church. I'm not confused. You buried the truth with the house. Caleb's heart began pounding. He had heard that sentence once before. 23 years ago. He had been 10 years old. His father had woken him in the middle of the night. They drove past a massive estate surrounded by flames. As they watched firefighters battle the fire, his father had whispered something Caleb had never forgotten. Some houses burn because of faulty wiring. A long silence. Then, others burn because they hold secrets no one can afford to let survive. At the time, Caleb thought it was just another strange thing adults said. Until today. He slowly looked back at the flower girl. She was quietly coloring on the back of the wedding program with a pink crayon. Completely unaware that she had just shattered 2 families. Caleb knelt beside her. Sweetheart. Who told you to say those words? The little girl smiled. My grandma. What exactly did she tell you? The child answered innocently. She said, if the pretty lady ever tries to marry the kind man, you must tell him. The seller remembers everything. And then, the little girl hesitated, as if trying to remember. Oh, she also said, don't let him drink anything. The smile disappeared from Caleb's face. What? Leela pointed toward the silver goblet waiting beside him at the altar. The one with his name on it. My grandma said, if he drinks from that cup, he'll never learn the truth. A freezing silence swept through the church. Every guest slowly turned toward the ceremonial wedding cup. The one prepared for the traditional unity toast. The officiant stared at it. Vivienne stared at it. Even Gideon stared at it. No one moved. Then, without warning, Gideon lunged toward the altar. Not toward Caleb. Not toward his daughter. But toward the silver goblet. Before anyone could stop him, he grabbed it and hurled it against the stone wall. It exploded into dozens of pieces. The church gasped. Nobody destroys a ceremonial wedding cup, unless they're terrified of what might be inside it. Caleb looked at Gideon. Gideon looked back. For several agonizing seconds, neither man spoke. Then Gideon said the one sentence that confirmed this wedding could never continue. You should have married her before the old woman died. The shattered silver goblet lay scattered across the marble floor. No one moved. No one spoke. Every guest was staring at Gideon, the man who had just destroyed his own daughter's wedding ceremony with his bare hands. Caleb's voice broke the silence. Why? Gideon slowly looked up. I just saved your life. The church erupted. What? Saved his life? What is going on? Vivienne grabbed her father's arm. Dad, what are you talking about? Gideon looked into his daughter's eyes. But for the first time in her life, he couldn't answer. Then, the little flower girl quietly tugged on Caleb's jacket. Mr. Caleb. He knelt beside her again. What is it, sweetheart? She reached into the pocket of her tiny cardigan. I almost forgot. My grandma said, if they break the cup, give this to the groom. The church fell silent again. From her tiny pocket, she pulled out an old brass key. It was worn with age. Tied to it was a yellowed paper tag. 3 words were written on it. Wine cellar, East Wing. Caleb's heart skipped. He looked toward Gideon. The older man's face had turned completely white. No. Gideon whispered. No. You weren't supposed to have that. Before anyone could react, a woman screamed. Everyone turned. The elderly woman from earlier had collapsed onto one of the pews. She was shaking uncontrollably. Through tears she pointed at the key. I remember that key. They searched for it for weeks. They thought Eleanor took it to her grave. Caleb frowned. Eleanor. The flower girl's grandmother. The old woman nodded. She worked for this family for 32 years. She cleaned every room. Every hallway. Every secret. Vivienne stared at her father. You told me Grandma Eleanor retired years ago. The old woman laughed bitterly. Retired? No. They fired her. The day after the fire. Caleb slowly turned back toward the flower girl. Did your grandmother tell you anything else? The little girl nodded. She said, if the key still fits, the truth is still alive. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed outside the church. Everyone rushed toward the stained glass windows. A black SUV had smashed straight through the front gates. It stopped inches from the church entrance. The driver's door opened. A man wearing a dark suit stepped out. No expression. No hesitation. He walked into the church as though he belonged there. He wasn't carrying flowers. He wasn't carrying a weapon. He was carrying a sealed evidence box. He walked directly toward Gideon. Mr. Ashcroft, you've avoided me for 23 years. Gideon's breathing became uneven. You. The man placed the evidence box on the altar. I promised your lawyer I'd wait until after the wedding. He looked around the silent church. I suppose there isn't going to be a wedding anymore. Vivienne looked completely lost. Who are you? The man reached into his jacket. He removed a faded leather badge. I'm retired Detective Nolan Mercer. I investigated the Ashcroft estate fire. A wave of whispers filled the church. The fire? What fire? I thought it was an accident. Nolan looked at every guest before answering. So did I. For 23 years. He slowly placed an old cassette recorder on top of the evidence box. But 3 days ago, a woman walked into my house. She was dying. She said she'd carried a burden for over 2 decades. It was Eleanor, the flower girl's grandmother. The room became deathly quiet. Nolan pressed the play button. Static filled the church. Then, an elderly woman's trembling voice emerged. If you're hearing this, I'm already gone. Several guests covered their mouths. The flower girl smiled. That's Grandma. Caleb's eyes never left the recorder. Eleanor continued. The fire wasn't an accident. The entire church froze. Someone was locked inside the cellar. Vivienne gasped. Her mother closed her eyes, as if she had known those words were coming. Then Eleanor spoke the sentence that made every person in the church stop breathing. The person who locked that door was a member of the Ashcroft family. A collective gasp swept through the sanctuary. Vivienne slowly turned toward her parents. No. No. Tell me she's lying. Neither parent answered. The recording continued. I saw everything. I watched someone beg to be let out. I heard them screaming. Caleb clenched his fists. Every hair on his body stood on end. Alina's voice cracked with emotion. I should have gone to the police. Instead, they paid me. Silence. Then, I've spent 23 years praying God would forgive me. The recording stopped. No one in the church moved. No one dared breathe. Vivienne looked at her father. Dad, tell me. You did. Before Gideon could answer, her mother suddenly shouted. Enough. Every head snapped toward her. She stepped between Gideon and everyone else. Tears streamed down her face. For 23 years, I've watched this family drown in that lie. She pointed directly at her husband. Stop protecting him. The church gasped. Vivienne staggered backward. Mom. Her mother looked at her with heartbreaking sorrow. I wanted to tell you. So many times. But he threatened all of us. Vivienne shook her head violently. No. No. My father would never. Her mother interrupted. Your father didn't start that fire. The room exhaled. For one brief second, everyone thought Gideon had been cleared. Then she finished her sentence. He only made sure no one escaped it. The church exploded into screams. Guests stood from their seats. Some rushed toward the exits. Others grabbed their phones. Vivienne looked at her father as though she had never seen him before. But Gideon didn't defend himself. He simply smiled. A slow, cold, terrifying smile. Then he looked directly at Caleb and said, You're asking the wrong question. Caleb frowned. What? Gideon's smile widened. Don't ask who was trapped in that cellar. A long pause. Then with absolute calm he whispered. Ask who unlocked it before the fire started. No one spoke. The church had become a courtroom. Every guest stared at Gideon Ashcroft. Every camera phone was pointed at him. But Gideon didn't flinch. Instead, he looked directly at Detective Mercer and quietly said, You only have half the story. Mercer answered without hesitation. Then let's hear the other half. For a brief moment, the two men stared at each other, like enemies who had been waiting decades for this conversation. Then Gideon smiled. Aren't you curious why Alina never went to the police? The question lingered. No one answered. Because everyone wanted the same thing. The truth. Caleb stepped forward. No more riddles. He held up the brass key. We're opening that cellar. The church erupted into murmurs. Someone whispered. The estate burned down years ago. Detective Mercer nodded. Most of it. He reached into the evidence box and unfolded an old survey map. The mansion was destroyed. But the underground wine cellar survived. It was sealed with concrete 2 days after the fire. Caleb looked at Gideon. You buried it. Gideon didn't deny it. I buried what needed to stay buried. Less than an hour later, police vehicles lined the entrance to the abandoned Ashcroft estate. The mansion was nothing more than blackened stone walls swallowed by vines. Nature had spent 23 years trying to erase what happened there. But it hadn't succeeded. The flower girl held her aunt's hand as they stood behind the police tape. She looked at the ruins and softly whispered. Grandma hated this place. No one noticed her words. Everyone was watching Caleb. He inserted the old brass key into a rusted steel door hidden beneath cracked concrete. It didn't fit at first. He pushed harder. The lock clicked. The heavy door groaned open. A wave of cold, stale air rolled out. It smelled of damp earth, smoke, and something else. Something metallic. Something that made Detective Mercer stop breathing for a second. I know that smell. They descended the narrow staircase. Every step echoed through the darkness. The cellar was frozen in time. Dust covered every bottle. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling. Broken shelves leaned against cracked stone walls. It looked exactly as it had the night of the fire. Except for one thing. At the far end of the room. A wooden door. Unlike everything else. It wasn't burned. It wasn't damaged. It had been replaced. Recently. Caleb looked at Mercer. Someone'd been down here. The detective forced the door open. Inside was a tiny hidden room. No bigger than a closet. There were no wine racks. No furniture. Just a metal filing cabinet. perfectly preserved. Caleb slowly opened the top drawer. Inside were dozens of folders. Birth certificates, medical records, property deeds, letters. Every document was carefully labeled, almost as if someone expected this room to be found one day. Mercer opened the second drawer. His face immediately changed. Caleb, you need to see this. It was a photo album. The first few pages showed ordinary family pictures. Birthday parties, Christmas dinners, vacations. Then, Caleb turned another page. His heart stopped. There was Vivienne. She couldn't have been older than 8. Standing beside her parents. Smiling. Nothing unusual. He turned the next page. The smile vanished from his face. Standing beside little Vivienne was Caleb. At about 10 years old. The same birthday party. The same cake. The same balloons. Caleb staggered backward. No. No. This isn't possible. He looked at Vivienne. You told me. We didn't meet until college. Vivienne's lips trembled. I don't remember this. Caleb held up another photograph. There are dozens of them. Birthday parties. Picnics. Christmas. You know, mate. You've known me almost your entire life. Tears filled Vivienne's eyes. I swear to you. I don't remember. Caleb's voice cracked. You lied to me. Then, Mercer found something worse. A sealed envelope. Across the front, written in Alina's handwriting, were the words. To Caleb only after the cellar is opened. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside, one photograph, one newspaper clipping, and one handwritten letter. He looked at the photograph first. It showed a woman kneeling beside a frightened little boy. The little boy was Caleb. The woman wasn't his mother. It was Alina. Written underneath was one sentence. The day I saved him. Caleb frowned. Saved me. He unfolded the newspaper clipping. The headline read, Local boy survives estate fire. His world stopped. Estate fire. He looked at the date. 23 years ago. The same night. The same fire. His breathing became uneven. I was there. He looked at Gideon. You told everyone I was. No answer. Caleb opened Alina's handwritten letter. The ink had faded with age. He began reading aloud. Caleb, if you're reading this, I have failed you for far too long. His voice trembled. You have spent your entire life believing you were only a witness. A pause. Then, you were. Everyone waited. Caleb swallowed hard. Then read the next sentence. You were the child locked inside that cellar. The room went completely silent. The letter slipped from Caleb's shaking hands. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. Every memory he'd ever trusted suddenly felt false. He slowly turned toward Vivienne. She was already crying. Not because she had just learned the truth, but because, judging by the expression on her face, she had recognized the letter before Caleb even opened it. Caleb stared at her. His voice was barely a whisper. You've seen this before. Vivienne closed her eyes. One tear rolled down her cheek. Then she whispered the 6 words that shattered what remained of his heart. I found it 3 years ago. Caleb took one step backward. 3 years. She had known for 3 years. 3 years of dates. 3 years of promises. 3 years of telling him she loved him, without ever revealing the truth hidden beneath her own family's home. He looked at her as if she were a stranger. And for the first time since the wedding stopped, he no longer feared her father. He feared the woman he had been about to marry. Why do you think Vivienne kept this secret for 3 long years? If you were in Caleb's shoes, could you ever forgive someone who hid a truth like this? Let me know in the comments, but don't answer too quickly. What happens next changes everything. Caleb couldn't feel his hands. The letter lay at his feet. 23 years. His entire life had been built on a lie. He slowly looked up at Vivienne. His voice was barely more than a whisper. You found this letter 3 years ago. She nodded. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Yes. And you still said yes when I proposed. Another nod. You looked me in the eyes. Every single day. Knowing my family had been destroyed because of yours. Vivienne couldn't answer. Because every word he spoke was true. Caleb laughed. Not because anything was funny. But because his heart had reached the point where it no longer knew how to break. I was going to spend the rest of my life with you. His voice cracked. And all this time, you were keeping the biggest secret of my life. He slipped the engagement ring from his finger. The tiny diamond caught the dim light of the cellar. Then it hit the stone floor. The sound echoed through the room. Vivienne closed her eyes. She didn't try to stop him. She believed she deserved it. Detective Mercer quietly stepped between them. Before either of you says another word. There's something else. He had continued searching the hidden room while they argued. Behind the filing cabinet, he had discovered a narrow steel lockbox hidden inside the wall. The lock had rusted away. Inside was only one item. A VHS cassette. Across the label, written in black marker, were 6 words. If anything happens to me, play this for Caleb. The handwriting wasn't Alina's. It belonged to someone else. Someone whose signature was written beneath it. Caleb's breathing stopped. He recognized the name instantly. It was his mother. An old television and VCR sat forgotten in the corner of the cellar, likely stored there decades ago. Mercer connected the tape. Static flickered across the screen. Then, a young woman appeared. She looked exhausted. Terrified. She kept glancing over her shoulder, as if she expected someone to burst into the room. Then she looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this, I wasn't able to protect you. Caleb's knees nearly gave way. It was his mother. Alive. Recorded only hours before the fire. She smiled through tears. My sweet boy. I pray you've grown into a good man. Caleb covered his mouth. He hadn't heard her voice since he was a child. The recording continued. I know what Gideon is planning. He thinks burning this house will erase everything. But fire doesn't destroy the truth. It only hides it. She held up a thick file. If he finds this, he'll kill me. Then she said something that made everyone in the cellar freeze. If you're watching this with Vivienne, don't blame her. Caleb looked at Vivienne. She stared at the television in complete shock. The woman on the screen continued. She was only a little girl. She's as much a victim as you are. Silence. No one moved. Then came another revelation. When she's old enough, Elena will give her a choice. Tell Caleb the truth. Or lose him forever. Vivienne burst into tears. No. She whispered. No. Caleb turned toward her. What is she talking about? Vivienne slowly sank to the floor. I didn't know who you were. Until 3 years ago. She looked directly into Caleb's eyes. The day I found Alina's letter. I wanted to tell you that same night. She stopped. Her breathing became uneven. But before I could, she reached into her handbag. Her hands trembled as she removed an old envelope. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Alina, standing beside a frightened young Vivienne. On the back were 5 handwritten words. Protect him no matter what. Caleb frowned. What is this? Vivienne finally spoke the truth she had carried for years. The morning after I found the letter, my father came to my apartment. He knew I opened the hidden room. He knew I'd read everything. Caleb's face hardened. And Vivienne's lips trembled. He gave me 2 choices. The cellar fell silent. He said, if I ever told you the truth, you would disappear exactly the way your mother did. Caleb stared at her. She continued through tears. He knew where you worked. He knew where you lived. He named your friends. He even described the apartment you rented. I believed him. I was terrified. I thought the only way to keep you alive was to keep you away from the truth. She lowered her head. So I carried that secret. Not because I didn't love you, but because I loved you too much to bury you beside your mother. Caleb couldn't speak. For the first time, he saw not the daughter of the man who destroyed his life, but another prisoner, another victim, Before anyone could say another word, a sharp metallic click echoed through the cellar. Everyone turned. Gideon. He had quietly disappeared during the search. Now he stood at the entrance to the cellar. The heavy steel door was closed behind him. In his hand, an old brass detonator. He smiled. I've spent 23 years making sure this cellar never remembered anything. He looked at Caleb. I won't make the same mistake twice. Detective Mercer slowly raised his hands. Gideon. Think carefully. Gideon laughed. I have. Then he pressed a button. A low mechanical hum echoed through the stone walls. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Cracks spread across the old masonry. Caleb looked upward. Realization struck. There are explosives in the walls. Gideon's smile never faded. They were installed the same week the fire happened. He looked at Vivienne. I'm sorry you chose him over your family. Then he looked back at Caleb. And now, the cellar will forget all of you. The lights flickered. The ceiling groaned. A massive stone beam cracked directly above Caleb and Vivienne. The first chunk of rock crashed to the floor. Then another. The cellar began collapsing around them. The first beam crashed to the floor. Stone exploded in every direction. The walls trembled. Dust swallowed the cellar. Someone screamed. Another explosion echoed through the underground chamber. Detective Mercer shoved Caleb and Vivienne behind one of the thick stone support columns. Get down. Another section of the ceiling collapsed exactly where they had been standing seconds before. The room filled with choking smoke. The lights went out. For one terrifying moment, there was only darkness, and the sound of ancient stone breaking apart. Then, a tiny voice pierced the chaos. Grandma said. Everyone froze. It was Leela. No one had realized she had slipped beneath the police tape and followed the adults into the cellar. She stood at the top of the staircase, covered in dust, still clutching her little basket of flower petals. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She was simply looking at the walls, as though she recognized them. My grandma said, the truth isn't behind the walls. Everyone stopped. Even Gideon. Leela slowly pointed toward the floor. It's underneath. Caleb looked down. Beneath the rubble, a section of the stone floor had cracked open. Inside, a narrow iron hatch, hidden beneath decades of concrete. Gideon's smile vanished. For the first time since the wedding, real panic appeared on his face. No. He whispered. No. He lunged toward the hatch. Caleb tackled him before he could reach it. The two men slammed into the ground. Years of buried hatred exploded into one desperate struggle. While they fought, Detective Mercer forced the hatch open. A rush of cold air escaped. Inside, a narrow underground chamber, untouched by the fire. Unlike the cellar above, this room had been deliberately preserved. In the center, a wooden cradle, blanketed in dust. Beside it, a leather suitcase. And beside the suitcase, a tape recorder. Mercer pressed play. Static crackled. Then, a woman's voice filled the chamber. Caleb's mother. Again. But this recording was different. It was calm. Steady. As if she knew this would be the final time anyone heard her voice. If you found this room. Then Alina kept her promise. Caleb could barely breathe. She continued. Gideon thinks this room hides my body. A pause. It doesn't. Everyone looked at Gideon. His face had turned as white as ash. By the time the fire started, I was already gone. The room fell silent. Caleb frowned. Gone? Then where had she gone? The answer came seconds later. I escaped through the tunnel beneath the cellar. Mercer immediately looked around. A narrow brick passage disappeared into darkness at the far end of the chamber. The tunnel. She had escaped. She had survived. Caleb's heart raced. If she escaped, what happened to her? The recording answered. If you're hearing this, I probably didn't survive much longer. I was badly injured. But Gideon didn't kill me. The room grew impossibly still. Then she delivered the truth no one had imagined. The person who betrayed me was Gideon. Every head turned. Even Gideon looked stunned. It was my own husband. Caleb's blood ran cold. His father. The man he had loved. The man who had raised him. The man who claimed his mother abandoned them. The recording continued. He accepted Gideon's money. He told the police I was dead. He raised you on lies. Because the truth made him rich. Caleb staggered backward. His entire childhood shattered in an instant. The greatest betrayal had never come from the Ashcroft family alone. It had come from his own. Gideon suddenly stopped fighting. He laughed. Not proudly. Not triumphantly. Sadly. Almost regretfully. You finally understand. Caleb glared at him. You murdered my family. Gideon slowly shook his head. No. I destroyed many lives. But your father sold yours. Those words landed harder than any punch. For years, Caleb had hated the wrong people. Gideon had committed terrible crimes. But Caleb's father had chosen to bury the truth. Not out of fear. Not to protect his son. But for money. Detective Mercer opened the old leather suitcase. Inside were original contracts. Bank transfers. Recorded confessions. Property deeds. In one final sealed envelope addressed to Caleb. He opened it. Inside was a single handwritten page. His mother's final letter. My precious son. If this letter reaches you, it means goodness finally outlived evil. He smiled through tears. Don't spend your life chasing revenge. Spend it choosing the kind of family we never had. Then the final line. The one that broke everyone in the room. The greatest victory isn't exposing monsters. It's refusing to become one. Caleb couldn't hold back anymore. He collapsed to his knees. 23 years of grief. Questions. Anger. And loneliness. Poured out in tears. Vivienne knelt beside him. Not speaking. Simply holding his hand. This time, he didn't pull away. Above them, police officers finally broke through the collapsing entrance. Gideon looked at the handcuffs. Then at his daughter. I'm sorry. Vivienne's eyes filled with tears. For what? He answered quietly. For teaching you that love had to be protected with lies. Those were the first honest words he had spoken in decades. He surrendered without another fight. Hours later, the sun rose over the abandoned estate. News helicopters circled overhead. Detective Mercer watched forensic teams carry decades of hidden evidence into daylight. The Ashcroft empire collapsed within weeks. Executives resigned. Assets were frozen. Families who had lived in silence finally came forward. Justice, delayed for decades, had finally begun. As Caleb prepared to leave, Leela ran over and slipped her tiny hand into his. Did I do the right thing? He knelt in front of her. You did something very brave. She looked toward the ruined cellar. Grandma said, sometimes grown-ups are too scared to tell the truth. So God lets children do it. Caleb smiled through tears. I think your grandma was right. Leela looked up at the morning sky. So, the cellar remembered everything. Caleb looked back at the shattered stone walls. Then at the people finally walking free from years of lies. He smiled softly. No. He gently touched her forehead. It wasn't the cellar that remembered. It was the people who finally found the courage to listen. As they walked away together, the camera lingered on the broken entrance to the cellar. A place built to bury the truth, but remembered forever. Because of 5 whispered words from the smallest voice in the room. If this story kept you guessing until the very last moment, let me know in the comments. At what point did you realize the truth was much bigger than the wedding itself? And if you enjoy suspenseful stories with shocking twists and emotional endings like this one, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications because the next story might make you question everything all over again. Until then, remember, some secrets stay buried for years, but the truth always finds a voice.